Welcome to the Death and All the Rest podcast, where we talk about life, death, and everything in between. Chris, I've got an idea for material for today. Okay. I this week on social media, there's this poem, and it's kind of like a rewrite of a poem from World War II to the current state of things today, politically, and where they're at. And I want to share it with you and with the audience listening, because it's been something I haven't been able to like shake off. It's really sitting inside of me and having me think a lot. And I think that there's a conversation and how this relates to existentialism. You cool with that?
Yes. Go.
Cool. All right. So I'm not a poet, so I'm just gonna read this, but add whatever cadence you need for your ears.
Okay.
All right. So first they came for the undocumented people, and I did not speak out because I was not an undocumented person. Then they came for the trans people, and I did not speak out because I was not a trans person. Then they came for the disabled people, and I did not speak out because I was not a disabled person. Then they came for the journalists, and I did not speak out because I was not a journalist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
Yeah. That's our moment. Potentially.
Yeah, it's that message doesn't feel very far away from the potential.
Why do you think that you're stuck on it? Start there.
I think it's because there's a reality for this, and I think that if as humans, it can be really easy for us to turn a blind eye to things that don't directly impact us sometimes, and not even because we're purposely trying to do that, because it's easier than facing it. It's uncomfortable, and subconsciously we're not even thinking about it. We're not actively thinking that we don't care sometimes about what happens to other people. Sometimes we are, it depends. But it's like this, the realization doesn't hit until it's too late. And then what do you do when it's this, like, the frogs in boiling water don't realize they're being cooked until it's already happened. And I feel like this is really relevant for us, this in relating to the existential stuff that we talk about. We say this all the time when it pertains to like our lives and existentialism and our meaning, and making sure that we're thinking about it before we hit that point where like life is coming to a close and we've missed the boat and now we can't go back and do anything about it. And this is the same premise of like, if we're waiting to act until it affects us, it may be too late.
Yeah. And there's plenty of evidence in history that has occurred.
There really is.
I think on some level this is a function of how our brains work. I have a strong belief that what makes Americans, what makes human beings so successful and as a species on this planet, which inarguably we are, and also dooms us in a sense, is that we're incredibly adaptable. We adapt to any environment. We can live underwater. We can been on the moon, in space, all kinds of different cultures and circumstances. People, or the fact that we can get in deep, dangerous addictions or stuck in bad places in our lives and then change is incredible. But we also normalize to things that we shouldn't, from a moral standpoint and from a personal threat, and this is not to say that it's not important to do things for others purely from an altruistic standpoint, because I believe that doing the right thing is actually pragmatic. It's beneficial to all of us. We're just not good at it. Because our brains don't work that way. It's a function of how our minds work. So we have to actually go against our programming or our hardwiring to a certain extent to take action sometimes. But it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty crazy that we could just see a horrible conclusion coming for other people and us, and we just walk straight towards it. Um, and we normalize to it, and we lose our ability to act, our agency. And in a sense, like it's a way of it's avoiding existential dread of fear, right?
Sure.
But then it gets you killed, and other people killed. Um, it's a terrifying aspect of the human condition.
And it's this question that I think about like the range of it too, because there are people who a lot of people who are like, how did the Holocaust happen? How did people let that happen? But then on the other end of that, there are the people who still to this day deny that the Holocaust did happen. And there's this level of like maladaptive denial because we can't tolerate the reality, the truth of something like that. And I think even to a point of what you said, you said about humans being adaptable. And when you were saying it, I was hearing that and I was like, we're talking about adaptability and we're talking about resilience. And resilience we think of as this really positive trait, but sometimes even that can have a negative connotation to it, because resilience is like our ability to bounce back under circumstances, but that doesn't always mean that we're bouncing back like we're resilient and we're adapting because survival mode. We've got to do this to be able to continue on and to live and to be part of this and self-preservation and protection. But like, I'm processing it myself as I'm saying it, because I've never even thought of resiliency it having a negative swing to it. But like, it really can, because yeah, we can bounce back, we can adapt, we can come back from things that happen, but we don't always necessarily come back better, especially if we're not contemplating what the circumstances are and what it means.
Yes, there's a famous line from a book. Oh, I can't remember the author's name right now. Oh, he's gonna kill me. He's dead. He can't kill me. Um, but man, famous existentialist. Oh, I'm so sorry. Anyway, it's Malloy dies. The book, and this guy's like crawling across a field, and he's dying. He's talking to himself, and he's like, "I can't go on. I can't go on. I'll go on." And after he's given up, he just keeps going anyway, right? Maybe he should just
Mm-hmm.
fucking make a left turn and do something else. You know, his will to live has trapped him, has circumscribed his options. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's something to that in all this too. But what you talk about, like how resiliency, like it can trap you, and it limit your options, and it can keep you from acting on the benefit of other people in our society. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is heavy shit, because I think we're all very, very susceptible to this. I don't know if this is like an element of our tribalism, but of our elements of avoidance. Um, we're just trying to protect ourselves.
Yeah. There's like this interesting human nature to polarize too. And I don't know if I'd actually be really curious if that's something that is more in modern society, civilized society, if that's always been the case. But this like, and we see it politically. We talked about this a little bit on one episode, just touched on it just a little bit. But what we're talking about here, like the people who are like, how could the Holocaust happen? Versus the people who are like, the Holocaust didn't happen. This
Yeah.
guy that you're talking about, where he's decided he's either going to live or die, and it's this option or that option. And like, all of that is that, and we're seeing it politically where people are losing the nuance of themselves, of their beliefs, of what is important to them, and boiling it down to like, remove the political parties, remove the the charge of democracy and having to assign yourself to one or the other, and like just stripping it down to like, as humans, what do we want for each other, what do we want for ourselves, how do we want to exist. And like, we lose the polarity if we look at it like that, because like, our beliefs on all of these political issues don't necessarily have to coincide. But I think, like, when we think about moving outside of those polarized places, there's a fear of losing something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a safety net that gives us, because there's an entire group who is, having the same mindset and believing the same narrative. So stepping outside of that is scary, but I think that's where, like, a lot of what we're seeing today is like, there's it's that you're on this side or you're on that side. You're with us or you're against us. And how about, like, it not being about the politics and the price of eggs and this stuff, and focusing on, like, how do we want to exist as human beings living on the same planet? Like, what do we want for ourselves and for each other? And just thinking about it from that lens. And I think there's conflict there too.
Mm-hmm.
People are always going to have different beliefs, but like, that feels like the more important thing at this point. And we're losing it for the sake of having some place to identify. And maybe that's what you're saying too, like that tribal mindset. Like, we want to have a group where we belong. We want to feel like we're part of something rather than being othered and making ourselves separate.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
Yeah. Like identity, group
Yeah,
identity gives you individual identity, and when the
sure.
group is threatened, you're threatened. And if you're doing something horrible and attacking somebody else, it's there's like a ideological or identical something word, uh, uh, proclivity to keep going, like an inertia, like you're in that moment moving forward, sort of a mob mentality. It's your fault, kill that guy, hurt those people. If you stop and think about what you're doing for a moment, and like force yourself to realize that you could be doing horrible things yourself, that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge psychic shock. You could cut yourself loose. So sometimes when people do bad things, like, you're more inclined to do more bad things, to up the ante, to prove yourself in that moment, so that you can stay away from that, avoid that insecurity of self. I'm sure that plays some element in all of this.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect to this, is like, who's at the fucking wheel? you know, if we talk about the groups like Illuminati, or we identify individuals in power as running things, I don't think anybody's really at the wheel of humanity. I just think we're all doing things. And some
Mm-hmm.
people have a lot of power and some people don't. And sometimes history turns on a dime and sometimes it turns very slowly. Um, but where do we stick? Where do we stick in? And kind of draw a line in the sand, or like, and dedicate our efforts,
Mm-hmm.
define ourselves
Yeah.
that way. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I even as you're saying it, I don't, and my mind goes to this place, like this thought that feels tangential. But I can't help but, like, you said it and it sprung something in my brain, this little
Hmm.
seed of this. And it's like, how did we even get to a point where we decided that there is one person who's like running things in society? And this is not specific to Western civilization. Like,
No.
there's royalty and prime ministers and other elements of this, but like, how did that become the way when you start thinking about stuff like that? And then it's like, but and what's the alternative to that? Like, I guess it starts, and it starts. It's a spiral, because then I start thinking about, like, religion. Religion
Mm-hmm.
was formed in this way to, like, create a moral compass for people, right? To
Maybe.
give this sense of, huh?
Maybe. I would disagree.
Well, okay, disagree.
I think that certain people took it upon themselves. Maybe they were more sensitive, or maybe they were greedy, to claim that they could speak to the sky gods. They had a closer relationship to them, and they became the priest class, and that brought them power. and they were able to say, you guys need to leave a sacrifice at the temple, really, really choice meat, pretty little virgin, some gold, and I'll bring you closer to God. And I would argue that the Pope ain't too far off of that. Have you seen how much fucking money the Vatican has? And it's all gold. Everything's gilded. Go fuck yourself. It's control and power.
Yeah. Well, I mean, interesting, because it's the same theme that we're talking about in these other realms, and it translates to religion. What I was really talking about is when we talk about like sins and like the commandments and things like that, because I don't disagree with you, and I'm not a religious person myself, but my point was, though, that there's this need to imprint on the masses that there is some kind of guiding force, moral compass, something to keep us in check. Because, and I mean, law does the same thing, right? There are laws,
Yes.
there are things that are illegal, there are things that are crimes, and it's this thing to keep us herded. And I guess it's like, what would happen if we weren't? I guess there's a fear around that, but it's hard to question, like, did that come from a place of when we were policing ourselves? If we were policing ourselves, was
Is that
that
the
problematic to the people who wanted power, or was that problematic to the mass?
or is it inevitable that their hierarchies
What
form?
inevitable?
The
Oh,
hierarchies and power structures are created as humans
yeah,
become more technologically advanced and more complicated. Um, Personally, I don't want power. I want to live my own life,
yeah,
and I want to have freedom. And I also have an inherent distrust of anybody who wants power. Because why? What do you need it for? What insecurity are
yeah.
you trying to fill? I don't know. I do think about this. So, like, you said it actually, and I already forget the words that you used, but like, is this who we want to be as human beings? Maybe another way of looking at it is like, is where are we going as a species?
Yeah.
Like, ideally, what should be our main goal? Is to be the best species that we can. We're clearly all in this together. Why have divisions and hatred and hierarchy? What's good? What's good about that? What's needed or necessary? Wouldn't it be better, like, even if this is the utopic vision, if everybody was treated good, and if everybody was treated decently and equitably, and we were good stewards of this planet, and so then taking care of the environment and the animals. Um, why not that? Why is that not our goal? Why is our goal, the crabs in the bucket, like trying to get on top of one another? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's inevitable as well because of the complexity of our history and our groupings. But that should be the goal.
And it goes into too, like, I mean, there's so many things that form, because what it comes up against is when you say that, it's like, yeah, why isn't that the goal? And it's like, but for some people, that's not of importance. That's not like when you say it, like, because we'd have to say, okay, what's the common goal? And if we all agreed the common goal is to be the best version of our species that we can, but there would be disagreement about what the best version of our species is, and that comes from, like you said, experience, history, upbringing, family system, and what you're taught, what kind of ideals you're taught, and we go against each other. And um I feel like we could go down the wormhole of this forever, and
Sure.
just like contemplating how this stuff happens and what it means and why isn't it different. But that's not going to do a lot, and it's not going to be overly interesting for a conversation for people to be tuning into, but it is something to be considering. And it's, I think something else from this, we referenced a little bit of like how this poem that I started out this podcast episode with, and then we touched a little bit on like the Holocaust, and something else that, and I feel ignorant for not having known this before, and I just don't have a running history of a lot of different countries all the time. I'm not a history major or anything like that, history buff, but I just learned this week And this is something that has shaken me to my core. I just learned this week that in Iran, that in the 70s, women in Iran had maybe more progressive rights than even women in the US do right now. And that in a matter of several months, less than a year, it was stripped away so fast. And I've known, and granted, like that happened, it was like the 79, 80 that happened. It was before I was born. So like my perception of Iran has been, I understand it's very conservative. The women don't have much freedom and autonomy from what I've understood. And I've known that bit of it, but I didn't know that at one point they were so far along in human rights and equality. And then to hear that, to learn that bit, and then to learn how quickly it was taken away, that's scary because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is real stuff. Like, let's name it. We're not going to be indirect about this shit. Like, name it. Like, this is stuff that's on the horizon in our country for these people.
Yes.
That's what that poem was about, right? This is stuff for women, and I'm still in this place, and I recognize this, and this is something that I'm still even reconciling for myself is my role as a white woman and my concern about women's rights, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface for women of color and their rights and the lack of equality that they continue to deal with. And then here I am crying about my rights, and it's valid that my rights, and it's still like it's not even a drop in the bucket compared to what women of color have to deal with. But like there's all this stuff on the horizon, and it's making people scared, and people don't know what to do. And then there are the people on the other end of this, and this is like tying things all together in this weird loop going back and forth. I feel like it's an infinity symbol, because then there's this, like, on the polarized side of that, there are the people who are glad that that's happening, that want that to be happening. And that's where this poem really struck me too, because it's like, maybe you do right now, and maybe you're not thinking about like what you're saying, this greater mission of like humankind. And like, what if there's nobody left and it comes down to you? Like, it's not going to just end with you if you're the last identity left after they do what they do to come after the marginalized people. They're not stopping. You're still not one of them. You're the last target audience, and now you've got no allies left in it.
Yeah. The subdivision doesn't end.
It
And
doesn't end.
but there's also like two things. One, we're talking about like making a better world. They think they are, a lot of them. They think
Right.
this is going back
Yeah.
to the natural order of things, or that's their excuse that they adhere to very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Christ's way, uh,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
the natural power dynamics, or maybe just fear that you can't stop tribalism, and so you better
Yeah.
protect your tribe and keep it on top. Supremacism, and this all ties into colonialism and imperialism, sexism, racism, and all the other isms. But there's also some people just want a fucking powerful father figure in charge who clears away all the complexity, and just says, just listen to me and shut up and stop thinking. When I said that, I heard my dad's voice inside me. Stop thinking. He said that to me once. Stop thinking and just have more faith. I was like, that's no, that's never gonna happen. I want to keep thinking and struggle with this stuff. But there are people who think like this, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
The
That's the other
rise of
side of the
authority.
coin. You just scratch something, because you're like, this mentality, because it's not everybody who's like, I don't care, I don't want to do anything about it because I'm benefiting from it. And then the other side of that, it's like this, I'm I'm letting fate take the wheel. I have faith that however it's going to turn out, it will turn out. And I'm just going to stand back and wait and watch it happen. It's this like bystander effect, right?
Yes.
Someone somewhere will take care of it, and it doesn't have to be me. But like, if we're all experiencing the bystander effect, nobody is helping the person in need, the people in need in this instance. And like, but I do think that like, I don't necessarily think that people who are not thinking about this or bothered by this or taking action or finding ways to do something about it, I don't think that they're necessarily all under the umbrella of good. I want this because I benefit from this, and this keeps me in a position of superiority. I think it is also, people feeling like, um, they just they're leaving it up to whoever it is, the people in charge, the being in charge, whether that's like a god or something, but they're leaving it up to something else. They're tossing it out to the ether and just saying it'll be dealt with like that. And that's a lack of, we've said this before, this has come up, that's a lack of giving yourself control and power, and losing agency in that, because there is stuff we can be doing to have an impact, and that matters.
Yeah. Uh, c'est la vie. Whatever will be, will be. And maybe there's a
Yeah.
little bit of grace to be found in that, but
Sure.
there's a lot of darkness in that too. There's another famous quote which I can't remember right now. It's like, what do they say to the people that what do they what do they call the people in Germany who weren't Nazis, who just went along with it because it helped their business or it didn't affect them in their tiny little village,
Yeah.
um, or they were just a little bit greedy, or they just benefited from it, or they were far away from it. What do they call them? They call them fucking Nazis. Whether or not they were true believers or not, history judges, and we judge, And I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be that guy that skated along. And I could probably skate along pretty fucking easily, to be honest with you, couldn't I?
Sure. Yeah.
White dude, masculine. Um, but I'm aware of this stuff. I think I'm a little bit more aware of this stuff than other people, than some people. Um, and one thing I've been thinking about. Um, so what do we do, right?
What do we do?
When it's
Mm-hmm.
so big and so fast, and their entire part of their move is go hard and fast. Steve Bannon said, "Do three things every day, and they'll never catch up. Fuck up three things."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, maybe, but it's better to go down fighting than to go down, covering your ass with your head in the hole. For one thing. Second of all, I was thinking about a guy who he looks through all of this from a very specific lens. Um, but he is a writer, an author, a political theorist. Adam Serwer writes for the Atlantic,
Mm-hmm.
and he is, if I get this right, um, African American and Jewish, and he calls this moment, or at least part of this moment, a resegregation. Like they're going back, and they're going to go back hard, and that's what he focuses on. I think there's more at play than just that, because there's obviously the oligarchs taking advantage of this moment. There's just
Yeah.
pure authoritarianism, the love of a crass, powerful asshole like the orange dork. Um, and there's other, fellow travelers who are getting off on this in various ways. And there's just sometimes like just believing in something is enough. Certainly for
Mm-hmm.
disaffected young men. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we find our lane, and it's probably close to what we already know and do. Um, and maybe that's what we're doing right now. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and like this stuff you were saying when you said like, oh, three executive orders a day it's by design. This is intended to disorient us, to keep
Yeah.
us where we don't know which issue to focus on. We don't know which is actually, like, there are different things coming out pertaining to the same areas. And one day it's this, the next day it's edited and it's a different version of that. And it's something different that's going to happen to trans people, right? Like, and we don't know what to do. It's intended to paralyze us from being able to take action, because if we don't know what's happening and we don't know what's going on, we don't know how to respond.
Mm-hmm.
But I think trying to like settle into like other ways that we can respond regardless of what's happening. We don't have to pick a cause and say this is what we're focusing on specifically right here right now. That can be great, but like it can change and that's okay. But finding ways, like, getting yourself involved in activism groups. What we're doing here with this podcast, this conversation here today, is part of this, because like it's easy. Are we at the risk of like alienating and losing a certain crowd having this conversation on this podcast?
Yes.
Absolutely we are.
Yeah.
And like that's something that I'm very conscious of. You're very conscious of coming into this podcast, having this conversation. And the reality is too, like not having this conversation is complacency. We're the same people that you were just saying. What do they call the people that just stood by and they benefited from Nazi Germany, but they didn't actively participate? They're still fucking Nazis. And I refuse that. I reject that. This stuff matters. And like, so yeah, at the risk of losing people who are gonna just not relate to what we're saying, I would rather be making a vocal stand about this stuff and about what matters. And my priority is human beings
Yeah.
and people having value, people getting to live the way that that is authentic to them and safely. And the rest of it I don't fucking care about. Like, I'll pay more in taxes, I'll pay more in gas, I'll do this for the other people in this world to be able to have the same level of opportunity and privilege and safety as I have. But like,
Yeah. Are you your brother's keeper? Yes. Yes, damn it.
we
We
should
have a
be. Losing
duty.
sight of that is risky. Yeah.
And that brings you duty brings you self-respect, and when it's done right. I don't know where I was going to go with that, but I do believe that we live in a moment, and history is now happening around us all of us. And you don't have to necessarily be, I don't know, the head of the revolution. You could just
Right.
be taking care of your community, because they're going to come after everything that supports society, because they want it all fragmented and for the taking.
Yep. And the
They're
more
going to come
broken we are, the stronger it is when they do that. Because
yeah,
if we're broken and we're not in this together, it's easy to work with a broken system.
yes, yeah. It's easy to rip it off, and it's easy
Yeah.
to corrupt it.
Yeah. You
I've
crack the foundation, the house is coming down.
yeah. Corruption happens to you as an individual, as well as a society, and you can feel it in your body. I've been corrupted. I was a corrupt guy, and I kind of got my integrity back through labor on the South. And it is not a way that I want to live.
Yeah.
You only got this one time, this one shot. So help out your community at the very least. Make that strong. Take action where you can. Be aware of things, the turning of this wheel, and look for opportunity. Educate. Read up on Project 2025, because they have a playbook and they are following it. And I need to do that for myself.
Yep.
Because I'd like to be able to see the opportunities to push back. And if you are like the guy who's looking at this going like, fuck you two libtards.
Yep.
Well, buddy, I don't always honestly know what to say to you, but I like you more than you hate me. And I don't like you a hell of a lot too. But I don't know what you're going to get out of this long term, except for more destruction and a harder life. Whether you get to see other people suffer, it's going to come back on you. And it's just going to get worse for all of us. The fact that you can't see that, which is glaringly obvious to me, is scary. Stop, de-escalate yourself, de-radicalize yourself, for God's sakes. Because if you want to get in a fight, I got one for you. If you want to hate somebody, or not hate, but like fight somebody, I got some for you. It's the rich and the powerful, because there's them, and it's a never shrinking smaller group, and it's the rest of us. And all of this is their game, pitting you and me against each other. When it should be like fighting side by side and going after those fuckers.
Yeah, that's what someone said somewhere. They're going after the wrong 1%, going after trans people.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, they're not trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
They're not trying to do something to you. And like you said to these people, if someone's listening to this and they're like, dude, fuck Bree and Chris, they suck. Like you said, libtards, weak, emotional. You're the kind of person I want to have a conversation with. I want to have a conversation with. If you can come to me and you can come in without volatility and we can talk, I have curiosity and I just want you to hear something, because maybe no one's ever sat down and had a conversation with you where they're not fighting with you or yelling at you, and you've never been in a position to listen because they're not treating you like a human in this conversation. I want to have a conversation. Like, and that's all this is like opening people up to a conversation that maybe they haven't been able to have before.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because there's already, the bias extends both ways, right? These people who are on the opposite end of our belief system, the people who are then that they're coming in contact with and that they're engaging with, they may not be getting the message across the best either, because they're scared and they're tired and they're worn out and they don't have the capacity to deal with that. And that's fine. I do. You talk to me because I want to have these conversations. I want you to hear something that maybe like doesn't change your whole line of thinking, but maybe it plants a seed that you're like, I hadn't thought about that way before. And that's useful. That's a means of doing something, having conversations with people that ordinarily maybe wouldn't have a conversation with. And you do have to protect, there's, protection of self in that, and knowing when you're at capacity to be able to have a conversation like that or not, right? But like, I am, and I invite it, and I want that. And I think, like, to speak to some of like the what we can do, I want to give people some ideas, because I think it's like, short of people feeling like they can run out and go protest or do something, I think sometimes it's like, what can I actually be doing? And I think some smaller scale things that make an impact is, mutual aid efforts. You can figure out locally going on with you food drives, clothing drives. If you know that there are people in your neighborhood who might need something, be in need of something, offering rides to appointments for people who are elderly or disabled or just have lots of medical appointments that they need some support in getting to illness, offering your services, offering your time, volunteering at shelters, at community centers, crisis lines. Like, these are things that you can do. Donating, again, like donating if you have the funds to donate, donating your time, your skill set. Identify, like, if you've got a practical skill set that could be useful in some capacity to someone, that's part of what we do here with this podcast, is we find ways to like have our skill set be accessible to people on a broad scale. So identify your skill set, and it doesn't, there's mental health support. You could be a legal person, you could be someone who's handy and you can offer a skill set, helping out in that way. Things like buying local over the big like corporations, the smaller businesses, the locally owned businesses, knowing the businesses that are owned by marginalized identities and supporting those, boycotting businesses that are unethical or don't align with your values. These are all ways that you can do that. And I recognize too, there is a level of privilege afforded to me in that I don't have to do this anonymously. You and I both, we can sit here and speak out about this. And for some people, that's not safe. That's not safe because of their community. That's not safe because of their job. That's not safe because of their relationships. Whatever it is, whatever the reason is that it might not be safe. And it's okay if you have to do this with anonymity. And there are ways to do that. Encrypted messaging platforms like Signal or Proton Mail, they're encrypted. They allow for that. Not getting caught up in like geotagging and surveillance areas. There's still an impact on things like creating and putting something out. That poem impacted me. And I actually don't know who to credit that to, but that poem had an impact on me. And there's ways of putting out art and music and writing and making an impact that way. The street art, the stickers that you can just put on lampposts and stuff around the community that say something and get people thinking. All of this is ways that you can still step in without having to necessarily unmask yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Those things matter. They are remembered in small ways, and they are accumulated. I would also say that facing this all the time is hard, and you do have to kind of go about it. And if you're like me, you'll have moments where you check out, dissociate, or feel apathetic. Or you have moments where you're fucking amped up and feel passionate and angry. So it's not probably won't be a consistent line, you know, and it doesn't have to be. And you may like be active, fall off, be active again, fall off, and in that those circumstances have a whole range of emotions, including guilt and shame, because you're not the perfect revolutionary warrior, or whatever. We don't have to be, you know.
No.
But all of our lives are ending one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And this shit could get very ugly.
Yep.
And I don't want to go out like this. And I don't want to see this happen. And maybe there's opportunity in all this too.
Yeah, for sure there is. And I think what you're saying, to your point too, is like, be intentional about your revolution and your energy, and like self-care is crucial in these moments. You said something to me, and this was offline, I believe, but one of the recent times we talked, you said something to me about how the people who are like activists are their life, and it's what they do. There's a separation between, they don't do it from a place of passion, because that's burnout, that's fatigue, and that's not sustainable. They could not possibly do that in the long term. If it was running purely on passion, there's a discipline that has to be applied to that. Of course, there's like passion tied into that, but they're not doing it running on passion.
Yeah. There's like an essence of like professionalism. If this is their work. And so there's a dedication towards consistency to this that they do. And these are people much higher up than me. There are people who are very, very involved right now, who are highly active. And different people are holding up different branches of what needs to be done. There are some people who do have that level of passion and maintain it. There are people that are visionaries and are able to hold that space. I know one very well. And there's other people that like have their various little skill sets and they can contribute. So maybe that's where organization comes into play. Maybe that's why people talk about that and talking about it all the time. And don't know where this is going to go completely, but I do know where they want it to go. And it will not end well. If we let it, sure.
Because we've got some control here.
Yeah.
There's some control to be exerted if we recognize it. And insight is that first step. You said that a hot minute ago, but like insight is the first step to action.
Think about this. This is a freaking large country. And there will be elements of it that are divisive no matter what, because we're a federation of states, right? And there's certainly certain states that will be pushing back, and certain states that are mixed, struggling internally, and certain states that are 100% for it. And the federal government's going to be playing into that, and there's going to be private actors playing into that. This could go a lot of different ways. But this is not, nothing's for certain here. There's a lot of possibility in it. And maybe this is there's some guy, Luke O'Neill is a writer that I follow as well. and he wrote a book. The title recently was I'll get it wrong, but a creature struggling to find a new form, something like that. Maybe this is part of a new turning in our world, because the rise of authoritarianism is global. It's not just America, although we're talking mostly about America here.
Mm-hmm.
And there are similarities. And I would argue that a lot of this is in reaction, either directly or indirectly, to both inequality, rising inequality, and climate change, and generalized existential instability and threat.
Yeah.
So all that's going to play a part.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm thinking for this episode, and I don't know if people know how to get in contact with us. We've got our website um, listed on YouTube and Spotify, but revhumandesign.com, and then you can reach us through that. Comments on the YouTube and Spotify videos, just if there's any questions about how do we do this? How do we do this in a way that allows for impact, but we're not sure where to start. We want to do something, but we're not sure where to start. Like, I think we're happy to have these conversations.
Yeah, I love talking to people, and I want to hear what somebody else's perspective is, especially if you want to tell me I'm full of shit, because A, I already know that, and B, I'd rather expand my awareness than those guys who fully believe this and have what they feel are rational arguments. I'd like
Sure.
to talk to you. I understand.
Yeah. Welcome it.
Yeah. They talk about migration as an invasion and illegal immigration as an invasion. I don't think that's occurring, but I wouldn't want to be invaded. And I would also know that, we've invaded a few people, quite a few, in fact. So you want to discuss that? I'm up to talking that.
How did America come to be?
Yes, this country is built to a great extent, full extent, on colonialism, imperialism, genocide, slavery, but not Christianity. They weren't Christians, the founding fathers. It's a tough one for you guys to deal with, but that's true. You can look it up, but you won't.
You can look it up.
But maybe I already said this, but not in this podcast, but another one. I read somewhere that a native indigenous American First Peoples saying that I kind of welcome this moment because the country's feeling what it truly is. It's showing its cards. And he's like, we knew this very damn well. And you guys came and trying to rub them out and lock them in reservations ever since. And if you look right now, they're actually there's the door is starting to swing the other way to a certain extent. Native culture is growing, and their population is growing, and they are becoming stronger. Maybe this is their time. Okay, I'm all for that.
Yep. Well, there's a huge disconnect too for people. I know there are people who are just like, illegal immigrants are or legal immigrants are fine. It's the illegal immigrants that are their problem. And I'm like, but you don't understand then. Like, outside of your own bubble of your experience and what life has been, you don't understand. These people are running from something. They're seeking refuge. They're seeking safety. They're not coming in because they're like, I want to steal a white man's job. Like, it's not. They're running from something so scary that they just need a safe place to land. And it's like, how on a human level do you not want that available to somebody, illegal or not? Like, you know, and it just says a lot about not knowing the state of other countries and what people are living in to need to flee like that and come somewhere. And America is supposed to be this place that, it's open to the people, the country of liberty and justice. And but it's only if it's accessed a certain way. And I think that way is not always realistic for people.
No. There's so many other aspects to that as well. First of all, it benefits our country to have immigration in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
First of all those people, many illegal immigrants pay billions of dollars in taxes for some of the services they don't get. A huge proportion of the people picking our fruits and vegetables, our farm workers, are illegal. And that's why our food is so cheap. You don't think it's cheap? It is cheap if you compare it to other places in a lot of ways. And they do a lot of other jobs like construction.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just wipe them all out, get them all, our economy would tank. So how do you deal with that from a self-centered point of view? If you're acting out of self-interest and you think that's right,
Mm-hmm.
uh, riddle me that, Batman. Or the fact that um, we're not having enough kids. If I personally think we can do less, and I think that part of all of this climate change reaction is a shrinking of the population, because if we're I think we're overextended. And you
Yeah.
can say, oh, we need more workers, we have to grow, and that there's plenty of food. But we're not. We don't distribute it equally, and because people don't want to, we waste a lot. But maybe if we shrank a little bit, we would be a little bit more nimble, less resource hungry species for a difficult time ahead. Think about this kind of stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I do know that there's this thing that happens to us where we we forget about decency, and we forget about um, just the basic values that are the core values, I think, of most people. You know, um, honesty, hard work, courage, kindness, generosity, empathy. Um, it's pretty clear in most of the religions, although I don't think it has any basis in religion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do we want to be Warhammer 40K? It's just a fucking hyper advanced competitive war like species. Is that your utopia? I don't know. I'm on some speculative limbs. Like, if we are facing an existential threat as a species, if we spend all our time warring, that probably tends to decrease our chances of overall survival.
Yeah, if we're too distracted by what's over here, we're not looking at what's over here, and we're once again not thinking about the meaning of it all and the purpose of it all and what's important and what we want to get out of it. And it's the same trap that we talk about in these other ways, that we're not thinking about the existential piece of our lives, and this is just one more element of that.
Yeah. Why do you describe yourself or identify yourself as a political party instead of as a human being? Why?
Mm-hmm. Because you're a human being first and foremost. Your political party, I mean, years ago wouldn't have even existed. It
Yeah.
definitely wouldn't be a part of your identity. Like, separating that out, your political party from your personal beliefs, I think is a big thing that they don't want us to do, but that's an action step for us too.
Yeah. This is First of all, Republican and Democrats' political polarity was reversed earlier.
Yeah.
And there before that there was the Whigs and the Tories. This too shall pass. Um, I don't want to live. I mean, we have a genocide going on right now, Palestine,
Yeah.
and not just there, Congo, and there's a lot of war and famine and ethnic cleansing. And in Palestine, they're using our tax money to slaughter those people.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and I didn't like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris either. Fuck the Democrats. If you ask me, here, like, chew on this. If you're Republican or if you're conservative, this is what I think. I think the conservatives and Republicans are now an extremist, fascist, uh, populist party. I believe that the Democrats are now conservatives. And I believe that the progressives and socialist anarchists, that's who I am, are have been villainized and used as a weapon to enforce the suppression of the freedoms of the common person in this country. You know, there is no great big socialist enemy taking over. You guys already ran everything. This was a leaning country probably throughout its history. FDR changed things a little bit and made it a lot better. But think about that. Where are you going? Where are we going? I don't know.
Yep. Yep. And just yeah, like we said, where we're going and your identity outside of like your political party is not your identity. Your
No.
political beliefs might be part of your identity and where you fall with like certain things that do get put on the political agenda, but the political parties and politics in and of itself are not necessarily part of your identity. You get to separate that out. You get to pick and choose. You might like elements from here and elements from here and elements from there. That's fine. Fine that that's individuating in a sense from like outside of just like development and with the societal pressure that's put on us to not individuate.
Yeah. How much of this is just capitalism commercializing us? I'm getting too big with all this, and I have this tendency to think too broadly, too conceptually of life, and like try and take it all on my own shoulders and like and go and like throw it away. Or why can't I like do some great big thing and change the course of human history? So maybe there's a lot of vanity there, a little bit of vanity, some vanity. Um,
Mm.
but where are we? And these things are happening. History is real. Actions are being taken that will determine the course of your life and other people's lives that you care about and other people you don't care about who still matter. Let's get in the fight. Don't check out. Don't be a passive passenger in your own life because it'll suck. Um, yeah.
Pay attention to what's going on. Don't turn the blind eye
Yeah.
just because you can or because it's
Help
easy.
small, those around you, build strong infrastructure locally because everything
Yep.
will be threatened: food, water, electricity, potentially. And stay aware of what's going on and look for opportunities to help the greater movement against the actions that are being taken against us as species. This inhuman movement for power over people at the expense of humanity.
Yep.
No.
Yep. Don't let them trick us all into the agenda that they're
Yeah,
pushing without
they
questioning
don't
it.
know what they're doing.
Let's push
They're
back.
incompetent, greedy fools. They shouldn't be running things. God damn. This is not the best that we can do. Not even close.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw something the other day that we can use to wrap this up that I just thought was interesting. Is something along the lines of like, um, billionaires are not the people who help society. They're hoarding the money. They're not us. We are not them. We are different. And when we start putting them in these idealized roles of like they're somehow looking out in the best interest of the collective, who is not that 1% or that 0.5%, we're losing sight of reality. So in the sake of closing this out, zooming in by focusing on what's in our control, and by what's in our control is what we can be
Yeah.
paying attention to, observing what's actually
Yes.
happening.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry for technical difficulties. Thank you very much for being here. Uh, and we'll see you next time on Death and all the rest. Cool.
Good.